Have you ever thought about the fact that Jesus had a dysfunctional family? The truth is, he did, and I can prove it to you. Now, the good thing is, when we talk about Jesus' family and the dysfunction that was happening inside of it, it actually means good news for you and me, because Jesus took that dysfunction and he turned it upside down to prove a very important point. Now, my name is JD, and the reason that I started this channel was to take small amounts of biblical text, maybe the kind of text that's just easily read over, or maybe it's not even covered in church, and to take that text and to mine the gold from it, because I want to see your relationship with Jesus only improve. Now, if you would, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the subscribe button, because it gets the information out there to more people. Now, let's get into this. I want you to think about your own family and the dysfunction that resides in it. Maybe there's quarreling, there's arguing, there's lying, could be a million different things that I could put inside that list. But the reality is, regardless of the family you came from, there is dysfunction inside of it. Now, I don't want to dwell too much on that. I want to actually tell you a story of a friend of mine. This friend of mine is from a different country, and she became a Christian at a very young age. When she came home and she told her parents that she had become a Christian, her father was enraged. And the reason he was enraged was because she had forsaken her family's gods that they had worshiped for a long time. And so what her dad did is he took her and he put her in a closet and he locked the door, and he said, once you renounce Christ, you can be released. And so he fed her food under the door. And this went on for a long time, living in the dark in a closet, being fed food under the door, not being allowed to come out. There was one day when her father came and he unlocked the door and he picked her up by the arm and he brought her to the front door of the house and he kicked her out. She was disowned from her family simply because she believed in Jesus. Now, I don't know about you, but I would call that severe dysfunction inside that family. Now, I'm going to come back to that in a little bit, but I want to get to something else first. Whenever we think about the problems that happen in our life, one of the common things that we'll say to people, and sometimes even to God, is, you don't understand what I'm going through. And when we say that to Jesus, it's actually incorrect, because Jesus lived on earth here with us for 33 years. You know, he was a child, and then he became an adult. And while he was an adult, he went to work every day. He put his clothes on just like you and I did, moving out into the workforce. At the end of his time as a working individual, he began a ministry. You see, Jesus understands what we're going through, not because he's God in the sky, but because he actually lived life on earth just like us. And in Mark chapter 3, it is revealed that Jesus' family was dysfunctional. But the story begins in the beginning of the chapter, where Jesus heals a man with a withered hand. Now, he heals the man in the middle of a synagogue, which is Jewish church, and the text says that the scribes and the Herodians went out and plotted against him for his destruction. Now, imagine being his mother and knowing that that was taking place. Imagine knowing that your son is actively being hunted by the religious elite of the day. That would be a terrible thing to experience. But the other side of that coin is there was a lot of people that were following Jesus everywhere he went. In fact, there were so many people following Jesus, the Bible states where they came from, and it's like coming from literally everywhere. It says, and they came from Jerusalem and Idumea, and from beyond the Jordan, and from around Tyre and Sidon. And if you're to look at this on a map, and you can see that people are coming from absolutely everywhere in Israel just to see Jesus. Now, the story continues with Jesus going up a mountain, and he chooses his 12 disciples. And when he comes back down, that crowd is still present. And it says, then he went home, and the crowd gathered again so that they could not even eat. And when his family heard it, they went out to seize him, for they were saying, he is out of his mind. I don't know about you, but if you have God living in your house and then you go out to say he's out of his mind, you are in the wrong. Okay? I don't care what the story is, you're wrong, because Jesus is God. But you have to ask the question, why is this an issue? Like, why is it an issue that all of these people are coming to Jesus? Let me give you a little background. You see, in 4 BC, there was a Roman general by the name of Varius who crucified 2,000 Jews at one time outside Jerusalem. And this happened because there was a rebellion being put down. Rome hates rebellion. And Rome is the overarching government of the day. So if there's a whole bunch of people coming together at one point and there's a leader, what Rome is going to think is that there's an insurrection. There's a rebellion happening. And so the people on the ground, especially Jesus' family, would have been thinking, they're going to come crucify us. Jesus, they're going to kill you. This is not good. We need to get him home. We need to get him inside. We need to talk him out of this, because what he's doing is absolutely ridiculous. Now, that's Mary and the family's perception of what's happening. But Jesus has this under control. I think it's also important to remember that when the angel visited Mary in Luke chapter 1, he told him that she was going to bear the Son of God, meaning God was going to come to earth through Mary, and he was going to be the savior of mankind. Now, she has a very strong statement, and she's a fiery young woman. You know, she's probably 12 to 16 when this happens. But in this moment, she has kind of forgotten that. She's forgotten the angelic visit. She's forgotten what she said way back in the day because she's looking at what's on the ground right now. You have the religious elite that are coming against him, and you have the Roman government that possibly could come down like a sledgehammer on top of all of Israel at that point. And it's terrifying. As the story continues to develop, Jesus is inside a large group of people, and his family is standing on the outside. They actually can't get in because there's so many people present. And the text says, "And his mother and his brothers came standing outside to him, and they called to him. And a crowd was sitting there, and they said to him, 'Your mother and your brothers are outside seeking you.' And he answered them, 'Who are my mother and my brothers?' And looking at those who sat around, he said, 'Here are my mother and my brother. For whoever does the will of God, he is my brother and my sister and my mother.'" And that is Jesus' answer to his family who's standing outside. You see, the people that came to see Jesus needed a touch from the Lord. You know, they were sick, they were demonized, they didn't know the truth, and they knew that something amazing was happening and that people were getting healed and delivered left and right around this man Jesus. And so Jesus had this crazy amount of people around him that he was ministering to, and his family was standing on the outs looking in, and Jesus recognized what was happening, and what he said was, "Whoever does the will of God is my brother, my sister, and my mother." Meaning this, your blood family might actually reject you for turning to Jesus, but Jesus will not reject you for following him. And when I told you about that story of my friend at the beginning of this, she was kicked out of her house, but she actually found a husband, and they now have a ministry where they teach the Bible and they care for the poor. Even though her family kicked her out, Jesus was there for her. When you stand up against all odds and say, "No, Jesus is my Lord and Savior," regardless of what everybody else says, your reward is you get Jesus himself. You have the peace of Christ that lands inside of you. You have your eternal spot in heaven, and you are a part of the family of God, and that is a big deal, and he's with you. You see, when other people abandon you, Jesus doesn't. When other people forget about you, Jesus doesn't forget about you. Jesus is with you always. He loves you more than anybody could ever love you. And what that means is you are saved by your Creator. So what this means is when you stand up for Jesus, you're not forgotten by him. You're not abandoned by him. You're actually part of his family. If there is any family you want to be a part of, it's Jesus's family. And so I hope this helps you, even if you're going through something that's really awful. If your family's dysfunction is kind of like the person that I told you about, the reality is Jesus is with you and he will never leave you. Thanks. And I hope this helps.